Posing and acting. I had made a class that we ran through for Wild Blue, and can take a second just to kind of talk about this specific topic. Yeah, Kermit, it's not easy being green. So this is what I'm talking about, right? We're bending along the lateral axis, but we're not bending along anything else. And so this is like kind of the general sense of what we think to be contrapposto. But a more natural version of this is actually twisting, you know, the along the spine as well. And so the last thing I wanted to kind of go over was shoulders. So a lot of, especially earlier artists, tend to think of the shoulders as part of the torso and as part of like a rigid body on the torso. But as our friend here from the Strength Side YouTube is showing us, there's a lot of articulation in the shoulder blades and in the shoulders in general. And so you generally want to think about shoulders as their own separate entity. And the shoulders generally tend to be both a counterbalancing movement and also something that like kind of intuitively follows intention. And so I don't think I'm going to reach my shoulder forward in order to be able to reach this thing. What happens is I say I'm going to reach that thing, and my hand moves, and my body figures out what it needs to do to get to that point. And so as you're working through, you know, the posing that you're doing for your characters, I really want you to think about like what's the intention, and then actually act it out, right? Think about, you know, what does my body want to do to be able to, you know, get this intention to really kind of play out, and then you know, kind of use your interoception to like, or your proprioception to like, you know, understand where's my body, where's my hips, which way are my hips facing, like what feels like the muscles that are kind of being used to hold me up. All of that is really good information to be able to understand the pose. And so, you know, if she's hiding, maybe she's leaning against the back of this tree. And so go take a few photos, or even just go like stand against a wall or some kind of like rigid object that feels like, you know, it can resemble a tree, and just kind of lean against it and see what your body wants to do. Maybe your hips actually like are more kind of like in a posterior pelvic tilt, right? And they're tipped forward instead of backward, right? Backward generally tends to be I'm reaching up, or I'm trying to strike a sexy pose or something like that. Whereas maybe, you know, if she's kind of curved in, maybe her shoulders are a little bit more protracted. Maybe she's, you know, got her hips a little bit more forward, and she's more kind of like caving in on the torso as she's leaning against this tree. And then maybe this arm over here is, you know, like leaned against the tree. She's using it for support and all of that. And maybe like instead of her head kind of turned up like this, maybe she's got her head kind of turned down a little bit, and it gives it a little bit more of like a sinister vibe, you know, or something like that. These are all things that you want to try to act out. You as the artist, you become the actor. You're the proxy for the actor. And so with all of that, you really want to be thinking about how you are making the viewer believe that your character is living, breathing, has thoughts, intentions, and that the motivation of what they're trying to do is super clear. So you're doing that through the composition. I get the story. She's going to attack whatever this goat is. But, you know, the feeling of, you know, her pose doesn't really tell me that. It kind of feels like I don't really care what's going on, or, you know, kind of this kind of, I don't know, I would expect this pose maybe as something kind of out of Mean Girls or something like that. And so just kind of a thing to think about. It's definitely this pose, you have leveled up a bunch from some of your earlier works where these poses are more stiff, you know, and I look back at the LeBlanc piece that you did as well, and it kind of has the same thing. And so as you're working on your next piece, yeah, attack, but make it fashion. You know, think about really trying to embody those poses. Really think about like what your body wants to do. Think about gravity. Part of what makes a pose feel fluid and loose is that there's parts of your body that are holding you up against gravity or holding you up against in opposition of a force, whether that's wind or gravity or, like pushing against another object or things like that. Where are the effects of gravity like pulling down on your character, and where are they having to be rigid in order to be able to fight those effects? And that would be the thing that would help you, really kind of get across the kind of the fluidity of these poses. Okay. Other things. So when I look at the perspective, sorry. When I look at the perspective, we've got, would love to see the pose class someday. Yeah, I think maybe next week, what we can do is, instead of doing portfolio review, I can go through the pose class, and we'll start with that. And, we can get as far as we can. I think it took like almost 2 hours to do the pose class when we went through it with Wild Blue. And so, yeah, we can, we'll look for that. Maybe next week. I think that's actually a good time to do it, and we'll get as far as we can. And if we need to do another stream in order to be able to get through the rest of it, we'll do that too. All right. Perspective. Main character. We're looking slightly up. I can see like underplanes of certain parts of the character, but for the most part, we're kind of looking relatively straight on to the character. I think the character's telling me that the camera is somewhere here, that this is where the horizon line is. And then I look at this back character here, or the creature, and we're very much looking up at this back creature, right? So like we're seeing a lot more of the underplane of things. We're seeing kind of the like underplane of the butt over here, and then the legs. And so what this is telling me is that this character, instead of, so like we've got a vanishing point for Ari that is kind of coming way up off the camera over here. We've got a vanishing point for the goat over here that's like right up about here. And so what that does is it kind of separates the space that these two are on, and it tells me that either there's some kind of like plane or something that this goat is on or that she's on that they don't align, or it just feels like it kind of disconnects the image and breaks the illusion of them like being in the same space. And so it's just something that you want to consider. I think it's totally fine to have, this be the vanishing point for the goat. You just also want to be thinking about, okay, now how do I bring that over to, Ari that's maybe standing this way instead of straight up and down. Consistent perspective also helps to create a sense of energy in a piece. It's one of the reasons why it's so easy to understand when perspective is kind of off, is because you feel it. And the reason that you feel it is the same reason that when we look at flow, that also like creates a feeling of either connectedness or disconnectedness. So some things that we want to talk about with flow. Maybe let's start with the piece that you want to review, and then we can kind of show it on the other ones as well. Generally speaking, you want to try to create energy centers for your image. And what I mean by that is like there's going to be these kind of like pinch points. Actually, let's pull this back open. There is a place that talks about this. Okay, rhythm and flow. Make sure that you guys can see this whole frame because some of the screen is getting cut off. Okay, good, we're good. Rhythm and flow. What is rhythm? In art class, you might have been talked to about rhythm and it being kind of this repetition of forms or things like that. I don't think I don't think repetition is really a great way to describe rhythm, because it's only half the equation. It's not just repeating, it's also rhyming, right? And so you want things to be different enough, but then also have consistent places that they're going to give you that sense of like continuous progression, while also having a common point or like something recognizable or relatable. Going over to, this is a piece by Cheng-Wei Pan, amazing artist, one of the like masters of like splash art when it came to like rhythm. Some of the things that you'll notice with this is that there's a lot of feeling of continuous movement. There's a lot of repeating forms, but when they cascade, and so when we look back at this, we've got repetition where things are identical, and there's no consistent point that a lot of these things are streaming from. And so it feels a little bit jarring to the brain to really kind of get a sense of calm and peace and order for understanding where things are originating, and like where the energy is coming from. Whereas when you look at these other, the green lines here, they generally kind of have like an origin point that's starting here, and then everything is kind of like exploding out in this cascading rhythm from that point. And so as we look at this piece, we want to look at, okay, where are our energy centers? We've got a big energy center at our focal point on her face. And then from there, we've got a bunch of things that are all spiraling out from that focal point. Even the secondary, like where we've got these other anchors, right? So there's the anchor of like where the bow is attached to her body, and like the elbow that kind of has all of these other tassels and things like that are kind of cascading from that. You can follow the energy from this main focal point through the rhythm moving away from it, and then to this other anchor point where we then have more things that are all cascading from that anchor point. And the pieces are all kind of flowing into each other and into the next piece. And the same thing is happening here, where we've got a lot of energy that's twisting around the character. And so what that's doing is it's creating this like really beautiful arabesque and kind of spiraling nature to both the pose and the way that the arms are moving. And it's also helping to move your eye around the piece. We've got elements at the bottom here that are keeping you from falling off the edge of the image. We've got pieces here that are helping to return you back up to the focal point. And so, we're really kind of moving the eye around. Do you have any book recommendations for perspective and balance? Yes, for character perspective and balance. Figure drawing, invention and imagination, or imagination and invention. Is one. I think it's Michael Hampton is the person who wrote that, and then also Framed Perspective by Marcos Mateo Mestre are also good books. There's two of them that really kind of get into the basics of perspective, and then also how to put the figure in perspective. Rainy River asks, would the face always be the energy center? Not always. I would recommend using the focal point as an energy center, just because the focal point is generally where we want the eye to continue to return. And so by having it be an energy center, it will continuously, it will continuously be pulling energy and also pushing energy. Think of it almost like the heart. It can get kind of spiritual with a lot of this stuff when it comes to talking about energy centers in images. But when you think about energy centers in your body, the heart is kind of moving your life force, your blood, your chi, through your body, and it's kind of bringing all of this energy that's bringing life to everything that's going on around you. You can think of this as well, right? You're trying to set up where is your heart, like in the image, and how is that kind of pumping that life force into all of the different places of the image and then returning it back, because the blood's got to come back to the heart in order to be able to be recirculated. You want to be thinking about that same structure for your images. So let's go to this next piece, also Cheng-Wei Pan. So looking at this, we've got an energy center that kind of sits along the top of the head here. And then we've got all of these kind of places, almost as if it's being blown by wind, everything kind of cascading, over the top of this character. And then there's another energy center this kind of secondary rhythm that's happening through the hands. Let me talk about line of action. Another thing that's important about this too is to think about your line of action. So what's the main action of, and you can see all the other things that kind of cascade down from there. So these are the types of things as we look through these images, we want to be thinking about where could our energy centers be, and how do we, really kind of create this sense of continuous movement. And so if it were me personally, I'd put, this would be like where my main energy center is, unless this image was specifically about her source of power. Like it's about the orb, or it's about, the goat or things like that. Wherever you put that energy center is really going to be something that ends up pulling and pushing a lot of attention. And so since this feels like it's a splash art about Ari, we probably want to put the energy center here. And then we want to be thinking about how do we want the eye to move around the image. So we probably want it to kind of follow down her. Maybe we're using her tails as a compositional element in order to be able to move you around the page. We've got some that are here. I think right now you've currently got this kind of line going down here, and then it kind of kinks out and then back up and over. And so just thinking about like what are the ways that we can kind of find the flow from this central, line, and really kind of get these arabesques to kind of pull back and then reference back to, or kind of bring our eye back to the rest of the image. Yeah, the thumbnail, Michael Silva asks, do you think about that in the thumbnail stage? Yes, this is literally like, like 2/3 of the thing that you're thinking of when you're in the thumbnail stage, is how are you setting up your image? How are you moving the eye around the page? How are you telling the story? And what is the lighting that you're going to use in order to be able to tell that story? All of those things are related. I guess the lighting is really the only thing that's kind of separate, but at the same time, the lighting is also contributing to the shapes that are made in the composition. And so you want that lighting to also work alongside of the way that you're moving energy around the piece. So, we've got this one kind of like set of maybe curves over here. We want to be able to like move the eye over to her source of power. And so instead of having this kind of trailing over, so what's going on here is now we've got, something that's opposing this energy here. Maybe we can have it work with, and so maybe the things are kind of spiraling, and we get this sense of kind of the way that this magic is spiraling from her hand into the sphere here. And, maybe we have another tail. Oh, I see you've got some tails here. Maybe we can kind of like have those, also maybe come down and follow around here. Or maybe not. Maybe it just kind of, curves in because she's hiding and she doesn't want to be like exposed. And so, you've got different ways that you can kind of use, also thinking about this with her hair. And so we've got this, maybe it's coming down and kind of helping to spiral around her body. And so we're creating these rhythms that are kind of moving around her. So right now we've got, we've got a bunch of things that are kind of pushing out here and then ending, pushing down here and then ending, pushing out here and then ending, pushing here and then ending. And so thinking about kind of how do we want these dances, these kind of like arabesques, these mudras, like the whatever like hand poses and lines that you're creating with this energy, just thinking about how they're flowing around the piece. I like that you've got the tree, kind of coming down around here and then circling back. I would think about, instead of having this go up and off the page like this, maybe have the branch referencing back to her to kind of help return us back. Or maybe it's kind of like going back. We've got other branches in here that are going back and pushing our eye back to the, to the goat that's back here. So the energy center doesn't have to be an object. No, it doesn't have to be an object. It's really, it's so many different things. Like at the end of the day, the energy centers, the flow of energy is the structure of your piece. And then you're kind of assigning the relevance of those. And so we've got, edges that can do it. We've got, different types of like maybe VFX or hair or lighting or, positive and negative space. Like there's so many different ways that you can, move that energy. It really comes down to just being really conscious about where you're putting the brushstrokes and where you're creating shapes. Ultimately, it comes down to the shapes are the things that move the energy. Where you're laying those shapes down so that it's circulating that. Yeah, so Blanky talks about maybe moving the sphere over to the other hand. That could absolutely work. It's also a thing like if she's trying to hide, she might not want to expose, the orb, and so maybe she's got this arm, that's kind of holding along the side of the tree for support, and then we've got, the other orb that's kind of coming down. We've got this energy moving here to like almost as if it's kind of prepared and ready to be hurled over at the goat. I actually really like that idea. That to me feels like it would solve a lot of what we were talking about here. Cool. Just going to illustrate the point real quick. One of the things that I like about what you're doing with this back here is we've got the focal point, which is the energy center. Things don't always have to cascade from the energy center. They can also highlight it, they can circle it, you can reference. And so maybe instead of everything kind of flowing out of this, we'll probably still have her hair, flowing from it, and maybe her body, so instead of it kind of coming down at sharp angles like that, maybe she's kind of lounging a little bit more, and then maybe she's got her hand over here, or she's kind of petting the goat or the deer, sorry. But then you can also have these other elements that now we've got this big radius or like set of concentric circles that are kind of pulsating out from that energy center. Also things that can be really good elements to be used to frame things. And so instead of having these two, mountainsides or the cliffs over here be straight up and down, maybe they're kind of curved a little bit more, so that they're kind of referencing that radiating, like almost thinking like dropping something into a pond, and getting the ripples of a pond, to kind of reference that, and thinking about too, maybe this deer is a little tentative, so it's like bringing its head back, and now we've got the structure of this like circle here that's kind of like, pulling its head back a little bit, like it's not sure if it, wants its head touched, but she's kind of telling it like, no, it's all right, and then this one maybe is a little bit more kind of nuzzled in, and the energy's flowing from, her main energy center, down her hand and to the deer over here that maybe it's a little bit more like it's resting on her, and so it kind of conforms to this flow here. And so those are all things that would kind of help to like loosen this up. Awesome. This one has a lot to do with gravity, right? We've got these giant heavy shoulder pads, and we've got this like very heavy sword. And so thinking about, how can we create this sense of, how can we create this sense of gravity here and really show we've got kind of our main energy center here, probably have like, something else from the shoulder, since that's where like, there's so much weight that's going to be held. Maybe this is, we've got the weight of the sword, really kind of being held there, or supported this way. So the hand, instead of coming down like this, is actually more convex instead of concave, and it's doing its best to really hold up. So it's a good, really awesome depiction of Tai Lung here. We'll look at the main line of action, since the action, even though he's got like a really strong line of action through the arms, the pose, it's a kick, right? Like the whole point of this pose is the kick. And so the kick is like the primary line of action. And then because he's twisting, this is a roundhouse kick, we want to create the energy of everything twisting off of that main line of action. So all things that really kind of help to get that point across. I don't remember the artist. I can look them up. They're on ArtStation. If you search ArtStation, if you search Tai Lung and ArtStation, I'm sure they'll come up. But I'll find out who it was before the next stream. Okay. So those are the main things, Blake. When I look at your pieces, and this was another one where we've got kind of a perspective that's like back here, the like vanishing point is kind of down here, and then we've got this character standing here. So it's misfortune, right? Like thinking about the energy centers, like I like that we've got kind of that consistent perspective where everything is exploding out from this point. But because it's down here, it kind of loses the reference of like what the main, like what is the like the main intention of this character is. And so she's all about her guns and kind of pointing outward. And so one of the things that might have made this more powerful is putting the vanishing point, since that vanishing point will naturally become an energy center. Oh, and that's the thing that I was talking about before with your RE piece, is that vanishing points will naturally become do we still have it? Yeah. Vanishing points will naturally become energy centers. And so even if they're not on the image, your brain is still kind of doing the work of trying to find where is everything converging to. And so, if we've got an energy center up here, an energy center down here, we've got an energy center on her body, we've got, it ends up diffusing a lot of the impact of the image. And so by having a consistent, if this was like one of the main energy centers of the piece, because everything's kind of converging to that, it will help to ground it, it'll help it to give it more power. But by the fact that you've got it separated, it ends up really kind of diffusing the impact of this image. Yeah, and so if we had misfortune, with her guns out, toward the camera like this, and we've got the vanishing point from those guns through her arms to some point behind her torso, and then we've got everything exploding from that. Now, it really kind of emphasizes the general action of what she's doing, and will give this sense of, like you're kind of staring down the barrel of the gun, or you're in the line of fire, and it'll really kind of bring more of that impact in. So just things to think about as you're setting up the image is where is the vitality of my piece coming from, and how can I consistently use those energy centers to be the main force, the driving force of the rest of the narrative. Cool. All right. Just little other side note. So we've got the triggers here, and we've got her hands kind of holding below the triggers. It's not really a natural way that you're going to hold a gun. It's either you've got your finger on the trigger, or you've kind of got your trigger finger like off of it if you're not wanting to shoot. And so it just kind of, it makes them feel like toys as opposed to guns. That was just one other thing. It's small, but it's a thing that popped out to me. All right, I'm gonna move on because I spent a lot of time on your portfolio. I apologize to everybody else, but hopefully you guys got something valuable out of talking about the those points. Do the trees in the RE piece follow the perspective? Trees are a little tricky. Like you don't really have a perspective for a lot of what's going on with the trees here, because they're so gnarled, and we don't get a sense of like where they're going. They don't really kind of follow on the same rules there. Some things that you can do is using the perspective, like the like size based perspective on the branches and how things are moving away. But even too, like if you look at kind of the line here, it follows the perspective for her, but then everything kind of curves away, you know, and we're looking up at these trees in the background. Generally, that's not the way that things would work in nature. Generally, the closer thing would be the thing that you're looking up at, and the further away thing would be the thing that you're looking more side on at, just because of the vantage point that you have. And so this just, it feels a little bit wonky because it's backwards. You know, by being closer to something, it's going to cause you to have to look up to see it, which is going to give a little bit more of a warped 3-point perspective. And then as things move back in space toward the horizon, they tend to kind of flatten out and be a little bit more like they would be picked up from a telephoto lens. All right. Cool. Is the point of all the lines that go to the energy center to get too repetitive? Is there a point where they get too repetitive? Yeah, so official calv. A lot of this you want to be able to feel, but you don't want to be slapped in the face with it. And so if everything is pointing there, it ends up feeling like, if you've ever seen a movie where the movie's trying so hard to make you cry, but you can feel like you see all of the things that it's doing to try to make you cry, it loses all of its impact, right? It loses the intention. And so what you want to do is you want to try to find the ways to make the viewer feel it without seeing it. And so you know, and it's not particularly difficult. We look at let's look back at this image from Pan. You know, do you feel like you're being manipulated by this image where everything is converging to, you know, that energy center? No, because it's not everything is converging to it, but the main, like the bigger the line, the more it tends to kind of gravitate and get pulled by the gravity of that energy center. But then even too, like there's other things that are, you know, like this, I don't even know what to call it, kind of sleeve thing, it's flowing in its own way, but then it's got kind of a main line that runs somewhat parallel or somewhat with the flow of energy. And then there's, you know, kind of this one where it comes down off of it, but then you've got the connecting lines and all of the other stuff. And as you kind of render it up, you know, you'll be looking for things that continue to push in that direction, but you're not doing literally everything. And so this is really kind of where the art of it comes into play, is not covering your tracks, but giving enough of visual interest and other things to keep you from kind of falling into that hole and being able to kind of see the matrix there, you know. All right, gonna move on.